All right, welcome to episode 56 of Biomassed, and we're going to be all about the Logis tonight and some commandos and probably a little bit of whatever else will get Soraya off our back. So uh, we're going to start the show because we got a ton of things to talk about. Really quick agenda recap for everybody. We're going to talk a little bit about the buzz about CPM2. I don't think there's anything official quite yet, but a lot of people are kind of warming things up by trying to throw their name in the hat for it. We'll talk a bit about some of the commando update or the commando progression that they've put out, which probably sounds like a much needed uplift for that group of players. I know it's a pretty small niche, but the guys that like it, they really like it. And then there's a pretty noticeable rebuild or optimization, however you want to call it, for the Logi class that wraps up quite a few different things to include slot progression, equipment progression, a speed versus EHP, which sort of touches a lot of different suits outside of the Logis. So there's quite a bit to talk about tonight. And without further ado, we're going to go ahead and get to it. So as usual, what we're going to do is we're going to get our intros in out of the way, and then we're going to lead into a little CPM update. So, Silly Rabbit, you might give us an intro?
Hey guys, Silly Rabbit here, Director of Negative Feedback, and I'm back.
Alrighty, Pokey?
I'm Pokey Draven from OSG Planetary Operations, a co-host here on Biomassed, and a writer and editor for the Biomassed blog.
Cool. Kane Sparrow?
Yes, a former member of the CPM and head of the Negative Feedback Alliance.
Cross?
Cross 2, member of OSG Planetary and CPM 1.
Good deal. Bam.
Hey there, Bam Havoc. Tinfoil hat YouTuber. That's it, really. Yeah, that's all I'm going to say.
Alrighty. And middle of the list, Soraya Zell, that will be doing the last intro minus me. So go ahead.
I'm Soraya Zell. I'm a member of CPM1 and a co-host here on the show.
Outstanding. And I'm Jason Larison, a.k.a. J-Pool, otherwise known as the purveyor of the Dead Sin Caldari Medium Drop Suit, which you will all want to spend a great deal of arm for as soon as CCP or Toddy puts it in. For the record, he gave me a wink and a nod and said it's coming. So I don't know what that means, but we'll have to see how that works out for us all. On that note, let's go ahead and dive right into our CPM update. So we've got Cross and we've got Soraya Zell here, who are two CPM members. So what do you think, guys?
I'm
What's going
leaving
on
everything
in your world?
on Cross. It's Cross's fault this week.
Yeah, like, that's different from any other given week how you behave. Well, I think most of the main action has been very, very public this week with Oliver Toddy's threads. That's been pretty much the entire outside of NDA focus. I could go over what I've been doing with it and some of the discussions that have happened, but that's a lot of the content of the show at large. So my, pre-cap doesn't really seem like it would do all that much good.
Yep, no problem. Well, let me ask you a quick question. If you were to classify sort of the future stuff that you guys have had discussions on, what type of category of activity or game updates are they looking at that you can mention? At least things that they're actively looking at or taking a peek at, maybe even working on. No specifics, obviously, but in terms of like the category or type of things they're looking to add or upgrade in the game.
I think Rattati's main focus at this point is really on establishing sort of game-wide contexts for things. While it wasn't the explicit focus of the feedback thread, he did list other things in his kind of overarching method in response to a post by Lether, and that's sort of the element that I think is the primary focus at the moment, is just having more of that cohesive vision and cohesive game-wide context that's kind of been absent in a lot of ways prior to this in Dust development.
Okay, no, and I think that's pretty legitimate. So a bit more of the sort of the macro type stuff, if you will.
Yep. Making sure that things can all tie together and, having clearer roles, etc. Because right now, as I'm sure we've all witnessed, it's really easy to get a bunch of people who play, say, Commando, for example, since that's a thing that I've spent a whole lot of time on in the past several months, together and say, all right, what do you think the Commando needs? Where is it falling down in its role? And you can get 20 pages of feedback, and the first 20 pages is mostly the people who spend a lot of time on it debating what the Commando role actually is.
No, that's a fair point.
So I think that Rattati's trying to move us in a direction where there will be less of that and more actionable feedback and interactions happening.
Yeah, I think this is probably a much needed piece if that's what his sort of architecture that he's laying out is, a little bit of the what is the actual design concept that ultimately governs what they're trying to do, and it also helps shape the feedback that I think the community could give them. So if the design concept, whether you agree with it or not, by the way, but if the concept that the developers are going with for a given thing, commandos, equals X, then that should shape everybody's feedback, or at least the direction that the devs will drive the the item or the suit or the class role, whatever. So that probably is a good discussion driver. I think that would probably bring a lot of things into focus in terms of how they communicate with the community, and also to a degree how the community talks to each other. So not a bad thing. I think that's actually probably much needed. So with that, what I would like to do is kind of dive into a couple things, and I think a few of you brought it up prior to the show, at least so we can put a few comments out there. Again, we see a continual increase of folks throwing their name in the hat for the CPM2, assuming there's going to be one, because there is not an official announcement from CCP yet, if I'm not mistaken. There's been some sort of implied, yes, we're getting after it, we're going to look into it, or expect some word on this soon. So I think there's a two-parter discussion. One, are we going to have one? Two, any comments on the initial forays by people running for CPM? And I'll open it up to the floor.
I don't see why we wouldn't have one at this point. Not, yeah, I don't know. I mean, I guess until something's announced and actually happening, whether that be, boot up after downtime all the way through to CPM elections, don't trust it till it's actually happened, of course. But I'm not really sure why there wouldn't be an election as of now. As far as candidates go, not commenting on any of the specific candidates, but I wonder how much it'll follow the last election cycle with a intense level of announcers and kind of a winnowing of the field as the election goes on.
As long as the people want it, I'm pretty sure it'll be an issue of discussion. So it's most likely going to happen, I personally feel.
Well, I ran for like 6 months before CPM1 was officially announced, so and I made it. I won, just in case nobody knew that. I did win a seat.
But your forum tag, it still says CPM elect.
I know. I never updated that. Like, I didn't think about it for a while, and then people started asking me about it, and then I decided that it was a joke and that I was going to leave it. So it just stayed. And it'll probably stay, like, after CPM1's term is over and everything. This is just going to be permanently CPM1 elect. But yeah, no. I, on the other hand, and I haven't actually like paid enough attention to specific candidates yet. But unlike Cross, I will totally be willing to speak about individual candidates and applaud them and call them out on being cred and all that, because I don't believe that impartiality does any good in this process.
You're writing an entire blog series on it, aren't you?
Oh, I'll do something. We'll probably interview people. If people are interested in being candidates, they should really show up on the blog, because, like, I think almost everybody, all but one person who won CPM1 the CPM1 election, was on our blog at some point, or on our podcast at some point. So you should, candidates should come on our podcast and talk about why they want to be CPM and why they think they wouldn't suck at it and stuff. And we'll probably do text interviews for the blog, and I'll probably do analyses of things, and at some point I will publish an official endorsement list, as I did last year as well.
Well, not to mention, I think our listenership is much bigger than it used to be last year, so definitely more exposure if you're on the show. So if you're interested, be sure to give us a ring and we'll get you on here.
Yeah, I mean, from what I've seen, you have quite a few people that have at least floated there. I'm interested in, or I am thinking about running for CPM2. But now, one thing that I do think is worth mentioning, that I think the role of the CPM has clearly evolved over the last year. From what you guys got into the job, looking at like what you, I think it just feels like, at least from the outside looking in, it's somewhat different than I think what most of you expected it to be, based on what guys like Kane or the crew previous went through.
Kane lies. Just know that.
Well, I think we all understand that. But no, I mean, a fair point though is I do think the atmosphere and the environment is dramatically different. From when they were in office to when you took office to what it is now, in terms of what the CPM probably can expect, and most of that is very directly related to Rattati's methods, I suspect.
I'd absolutely say a lot has changed. I'll just say a couple of conversations where I had to tell CPM 0 members that the CPM 1 term has not even been remotely similar in terms of how we're approached, how we're communicated with, etc. from what we heard. And I think to some degree that will continue to evolve. I'm sure CPM 2 will be telling me the same when I'm telling them, but this, hopefully. It's continuing to evolve. Rattati's obviously doing a lot of things that should have always been out to the community, now out to the community. So the CPM job is able to, hopefully, I think, focus on, what it's really meant to be, which is focusing on the long term and the stuff that happens behind the curtain, and making sure that none of that becomes a, sudden and scary surprise.
One thing I'd like to throw out there, as far as preconceptions or misconceptions that I frankly don't see changing, is this notion that I've seen amongst some, at least theoretical candidates out there, that they're going to get themselves elected and quote unquote make CCP fill in the blank. And to anyone and everyone who has this attitude that you're going to ever force CCP Rattati to do something in any context, don't even bother running unless you can let that go, because you're only opening yourself up to an excruciating term in which you will accomplish nothing of value.
Hey, sometimes though, yelling is required.
No, I'm not saying don't contradict, don't even get, vocal or emphatic, and I've definitely had my moments doing that, but there's a stark difference between...
You're so friendly and peaceable.
Well, by and large I try to be, but there are moments, as I believe you have seen once or twice. The point being, you can be adamant and you can be even intractable, but that is different from being unprofessional or thinking that you get to have some sort of veto power or, executive authority, which CPM do not.
Cross, I have to ask, I may have misheard this, but did you just tell Sarai don't make you take your belt off?
Well, I like to phrase things in a diplomatic manner, Jay. As you know, I may have picked up a pointer or two here, so I wouldn't say that exactly. But
I got you, man. I'm just playing. All right.
I'm still on the outside looking in. So what I have to say basically, from there's a couple CPMs in here and one former. I think for the new wave guys coming in CPM 2, I think the best thing they should go in with is all the information that's been given.
Hey, Silly, you're breaking up pretty bad, man.
No. Can you hear me?
Yep, go ahead.
Where did I cut off at? I'm sorry, guys.
Say again.
Before you said anything meaningful there.
Yeah, pretty much.
When you got to the meat of it.
Basically what I'm saying, I feel like CPM 2, anything they should bring to the table, the game's more, I would say, vocal and open to the public now. Like you guys were saying earlier, I'm still on the outside looking in, and obviously your worlds are different once you get inside that actual occupation and start, really getting into the specifics of the game and what to convey and what not to convey. I feel that it's public now. The game is public now. You see where the game is. You know what's happening. If you're aware enough and you're understanding enough to know where the game is at this point, I feel that the next wave of CPMs should feel the need to go in and bring to the table of, hey, what can I bring to enhance the game to better serve the community or better, get better enjoyment out of it. That whole notion of I'm gonna change this. Yeah, I see that too. And it's just like, dude, if you're really saying that at this point, you really need to have a wake up call or something, because it's to go in with that notion is, I feel you're completely blind. Like, you don't know what the heck you're doing if you're going in with that that mind frame.
Yeah, I'd
Did
say
I
that's
break up
pretty
at
on
all?
point.
Did I break up? I don't
No,
know.
No, you're good.
no.
Yes.
I would say though that on that point of like how the CPM has evolved, I would say that a lot of what CPM 0 had to deal with, and I think even initially in some of CPM 1's term, was you feel like your nose was in the weeds when really you should be at the 1,000-foot level kind of deal. And I think a lot of that has evolved finally. And this one of the things, same thing with the CSM. The CPM is an organic organization, and it evolves over time, to improve. And I think it's important now that we have when it comes down to getting in the weeds and the minutia, that's something that's dealt with the community directly, and then that frees up the CPM to kind of tackle larger issues like what's going to happen, what happens with dust on the PS3, what happens with this, what is the CPM having to deal with in terms of Legion stuff, etc., etc.
This game is a frontier to a level, I would say, just in how everything has been going. It's almost like a learning. You're learning as you go. Nothing is set in stone, and it's like, it's pretty much you're going out to an unknown. I'm noticing from communications with people who are deeper into the game than I am. It's definitely, for them, it's like, yo, you're in for a ride, basically.
Well, and in development, it's pretty much the same in a lot of ways. You can glance over at our sister project with Eve, and a lot of people say, well, look at the polish in Eve, and that's legit. Eve is quite polished by comparison at this point.
How many years is it?
But exactly. And that's a lot of what's happening, where it's like establishing an identity. We have lore and things that we can look to from Eve, which helps for sure, but things don't translate directly. Even on a purely fiction lore sense of things, what the ground military is going to be doing and what the space forces are doing won't be identical. And when you get to the actual mechanics of a game, that's going to be drawn even further. You can't copy paste mechanics and ideas.
I agree, for sure. Like, at this point, like, every time I look at Eve, I'm sorry. Every time I look at Eve and then I look at Dust, I remember they said at the beginning of this is going to be something that they plan for 5 to 10 years down the line. We're already pushing into the third year. It's slow, and at times, as you don't know if the game's going to stop. Like, the whole tinfoil hat mentality of, oh, is it going to end tomorrow, or this game is never going to do this, or X, Y, and Z. It's just like, yo, this is. I'm pretty sure Eve was at this kind of limbo phase of what's next. At a certain point in the beginning, and everything just polishes itself out. Like, I can imagine if this game 7 years down from the line, 8 years down from the line, it's more established, more involved. I just, you have to be willing to try to see it through. You know what I mean? Like, yeah.
And continue to push CCP for a port.
Yeah, you know what I mean? Just push. Push for it to succeed. I'm sure it will. Just push.
Well, I think that's what anybody that's been hanging around Dust for, I don't know, more than a year and a half, that's probably how they look at it. Otherwise, they would have walked. There's been something about the game that captured their imagination, or their interest in the type of game, because it applies some niche things to the gaming community that a lot of people like. That's why we're all here. Let's be realistic, because the reality is a whole lot of the community since that we joined with have come and gone, and we're still here because there's something about we enjoy in the game, and there's also like some social ties in there too. So that's legit. The one thing that is the clear elephant in the room is, at some point CCP really does, they have to tell us what is the plan beyond like a year, because I think it is, from a customer standpoint, it is a bit foolish for them to go through the upcoming holiday season, where a whole lot more PS4s are going to get sold and not many PS3s, and they need to at some point have say something about what their long-term plans are, because hey, I'd love to stick with them in a variety of different platforms. I think I'd be okay with that. But boy, there's also the component of, I am a customer, and there's certain information I would like about this product.
That you're putting your time.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and that's the big thing. You're going to put time or money into it potentially, and increasingly it's money now because they have begun to really strike into monetization on a very wide scale in a way that they hadn't in the first 2 years of the game, frankly.
Just got
So
to show some stats.
yeah, you got to see some kind of almost like return on the investment. You're not a shareholder, but there's a fine line between a shareholder and a consistent customer that pays you money, particularly in the gaming world.
Get a PS4 and come play Valkyrie with me. Yeehaw.
That's a technique too. So, all right, guys. Well, we're going to go ahead and push past this one because we could clearly spend a lot of time talking about this. One thing I would like to kind of dive right into is let's get into a little bit of the meat and potatoes, like some of the more technical things that they've been discussing in the game, some updates. The first one up is a little bit of a revamp for the Commando class, and I'll kind of leave this one up to I think Pokey and Kane probably have the most hands-on experience. Less than other guys do. It sounds like some pretty simple stuff in terms of equalizing the high-low slots with Sentinels and a little bit of the speed factor that we've been looking at in terms of the speed versus EHP. Does that sound about right, guys?
Yeah, pretty much. I mean, you hit the nail there. They're just adding the extra slot to bring it so they have the same slot layout as the Sentinel, so all heavy frames will have the same slot layout, which is pretty neat. Much needed. The Commando only had 4 slots at the proto level, which is pretty pitiful. So we'll have 5 now, and I think that'll be a lot more appropriate. As for the speed, we'll probably get into that later, but it's definitely pushing it up to be more in line with the HP speed curve that Rattati's working on, and it's much needed. I mean, the Commandos weren't in a bad spot, but they were kind of so it's good to give it a little bit of a buff there, and I think that they'll be feeling a lot better with those small increases.
Yeah, no, I think that's pretty legit. Now, there's still no discussion about anything to do with any of the bonuses, right?
Nothing so far, but he seems open to the idea of reworking bonuses in general for a lot of suits, so we'll see.
Okay, all right. Any other open comments on the Commando class?
I'm happy to see that it's going to get some more durability. I actually spec'd into the suit. Let me mute that. I actually spec'd into the suit around 1.8, I believe, and then I quickly spec'd out of it just because it was just, I love the stats that it proposed, like in terms of racial bonuses, but once I actually started using it and I protoed it out, it just wouldn't last, and I spec'd out of it. So, respect. It's just, you don't want that. You don't want that to not be an issue to deal with. I don't know if I'm wording it right or not, but I'm just happy that it's getting something at least. It's just, it was too soft of a suit.
Yeah, no, I would totally agree with that.
A lot of what's being talked about now is pretty much the solid universal feedback I've gotten from the community. I mean, the thread has been running for a number of months now, and pretty much, by and large, boiled down to normalize the slots and adjust fittings as needed. And it's nice to see that that's being talked about in a more direct way.
Now, it is getting a mild speed increase, right? Just at base foot speed.
Yeah, that's what it looks like from what I gathered in the speed HP thread, which was mostly about the Logis, but the Commandos were definitely mentioned in that, so they'll be getting a small boost to their mobility.
And the slots are going to be geared towards the Sentinel class, you were saying, offside?
Yeah, that's my understanding, that it'll be the same as the Sentinel.
Yeah, I would make a minor footnote on that. I don't think that the speed HP ratio thing is really geared towards any class. It's meant to be a game-wide methodology. There's just a comment on moving Logi and Commando since they were both flaggers when that methodology was applied.
Yeah, they're being pushed up to have the speed that they should, given their defensive capabilities, assuming that game-wide speed defense curve.
We speak so calmly of this, but this is going to be such a major change to the game. Oh, man.
Now, real quick, guys, before we dive in, we did have another guest join us, and I'd like to go ahead and get an introduction. And I think we've got I think she is it's the first time on Biomassed. So, Zarya, if you don't mind, could you give us a quick introduction?
Well, first of all, yeah, can you actually hear me?
Absolutely.
Thank you. Well, I'm Zarya. Long-time player of Dust. Apparently a fan of CCP to my sins. Don't know why, but still here. And I don't really know what else to say.
That's fair. What corp are you in?
Currently, I'm the CEO of OH.
Okay, there you go. So we've got Zarya from Outer Heaven, and she is a well-known veteran Logi player, probably one of the better competitive Logis that are still running in the game right now. A lot of PC experience, and this is a great thing that we're able to have her on. So I think by my count, you've got Bam, Silly, you, and me in the room. So I think that's
That's a
off the
lot
top
of
of my head, like
knowledge.
that's like 8 years of combined Logi work.
What
Yeah,
Zarya is also
Zara's
being
logic
too
me
nice
many
to
times.
what Zarya is also being too nice to mention is that I am directly responsible for her not being on time because I'm terrible with time zones. So everyone can throw stones at me.
Well, we've also established everybody in generally North America does not do time zones well. So
This is why we use UTC.
Yes, and I checked with him on the UTC, and then he told me it was 6 hours from now when it actually was 5 hours from. Yeah. So yeah, you know.
it's okay. It's trust me, we have this happen almost every week. And we've been doing it for over a year. I guarantee every week there's one of these. But we really do appreciate you could make it. And we were just kind of diving in. I think you hopped in when we were kind of finishing up our chat about the commando, and we were kind of sliding into the EHP slash or versus speed discussion. And I think this is probably a good way we can talk about that for a few minutes and then kind of bridge over into the Logi update, if you guys don't mind. So we'll kind of steer the plane back on point a little bit. Broadly, what it looks like is Rattati laid out a pretty good product, graphical product on the forums, where he sort of showed the outliers that Cross mentioned in terms of where your EHP was versus where your base foot speed was, and then he sought to make it a more narrow linear progression, and it looks like he even compressed it a little bit, not a whole lot. So it basically made the lines neater, and the effect is that suits or suit classes that have traditionally lagged behind, no pun intended, would get generally some kind of uplift in their base foot speed. I don't think anybody got any foot speed taken away necessarily. So does that sound about right, guys?
It's the problem is there's a lot of variance and it's how it's being applied. So there's a lot of talk about in the original model, assaults actually had their run speed or foot speed, as you say, reduced in the original proposal, and their sprint speed reduced. Then there was a modification to that where maybe their movement speed was reduced, but then their sprint modifier was increased, therefore leaving them with a faster sprint speed, while Logis have a faster move speed. And then the thread kind of devolved into a whole lot of different ways of necessarily approaching how you put these suits on the curve.
Go ahead. I'm sorry, Cross.
One of the big things that's sort of been coming out of the thread and various ancillary discussions about the thread happening in other mediums and contexts is that of the types of move speed, right now the elephant in the room is the strafe speed because of how it interacts with, or to be more blunt, breaks hit detection within the game.
God, it is a nightmare. It is the bane to this game, in my personal opinion. I hate it. Has to be dealt with.
I think that pretty much sums it up nicely.
Well, thankfully, there's also an independent modifier for strafe, which can be changed. It has been changed before. So, they have options.
The original modifier was 60% of movement speed was strafe speed. And then at one point it ended up, I can't remember exactly what point release for Uprising, ended up going to 100% of movement speed. And then it was reduced down to 90%.
Yeah, both of those changes happened early Uprising, very early.
So just a quick question as I'm looking at the graphic. And Cross, you might be able to interpolate this. The base EHP versus speed at the proto level, it's got like 3 dots. Like, so you'll see assault and have like 3 orange dots. Is that indicative of the upper dot would be like the min assault, and the lowest dot would be the MR, and then everything and then the other 2 fall in between that somewhere?
In essence, yeah.
Oh, okay. All right, I got you. I'm curious. What most people, I think, prior to this, at least my feeling was that they thought the assaults should be the faster suits, and that Logi should have more defensive capability. How did we arrive at speed equals defense for Logis?
Well, a lot of the feedback going through a number of threads was not what I would call comprehensive or focused. And it certainly wasn't a clear black and white of one thing is better than the other. And there was a major push early on when the question was raised about how to alter survivability so that Logis weren't just, chum to be fed upon. And the major heavy push within the feedback that I was getting in that context from those who weren't Logis was that you couldn't have them above a certain level of HP or EHP. I think that a lot of that is probably a direct reaction to the unfortunate occurrence with the Cal Logi shield bonus back in the day. But there was a major push that HP could not be the vector to improve survivability, so that left speed.
Okay, that's interesting. I could kind of see that, I guess. I mean, it's definitely a viable method. It struck me as that most people would desire the assaults to be faster, so to speak. So okay, all right, that's fair. Now, one of the things I've got to ask. Usually, when you have a discussion about speed and HP, or speed versus health, let's just call it that. The other mechanism that is kind of the thread that ties the two is your defensive capability based on buffer, or is it based on regen? And traditionally, the lower your health or your EHP is, the more you rely on regen. But I don't see any of that discussion in here. And last time I checked the stats for the Logi suits, not a whole lot in there that would indicate that they're a regen-based suit, particularly compared to the assaults.
Yeah, that's fairly on point. And there's kind of a dual layer to that because it's not just HP regen that hasn't been directly addressed. It's also speed regen, in essence, because stamina and the regeneration rate thereof definitely applies as a force multiplier to the value of sprint speed, just as, say, shield regen or shield depleted delay apply to the value of shield HP.
Yeah, and I would say just with this, I'll kind of lay off and let the other Logi bros jump in on it. But it also strikes me that and I think I made this comment in a forum, is I can't really rep myself, but I can rep thousands upon thousands of HP for anybody else in my squad or on the team. So not having the ability that's innate to my suit or my class to regen myself, either with a rep tool or something. If you're not going to, it just feels like you need to cook something into the suit to create that gap. Otherwise, you're going to have a moderately faster suit that is still quite squishy, and then once you poke the balloon a little bit, it's still going to go down quick.
Yep.
I think, though, that it's important to address maybe tackling one issue at a time. I think if we try to say, okay, let's change this, and then let's also change the regenerative abilities of these suits and stuff like that, we're going to end up with a mess like we did in the Slayer Logi situation. I think it's better to, especially since the speed curve is hitting every suit in the game, essentially, I think it's a good way to tackle the issue first, see how things are affected by tackling that issue, and then go from there.
Right, but the slowest suits in the game have the best regen, like hands down.
Because I can understand why they would have the best regen for the lack of speed, the lack of being able to get away from enemy fire.
Right, but then you would need to increase the buffer then on the faster suits.
I can agree with that. Because I'm looking at how the game has shifted, like the actual gameplay. The game's gotten faster in terms of combat. It noticed like people have kind of reduced the armor, except for certain situations with like heavies. There's it's key instances where you'll get a heavy situation, but I feel like the like what they're about to install, I feel it's going to regress back to that whole Slayer Logi phase. But like you said earlier, that it'll just make it squishier and faster. But I'm not. I was fine with the way the Logi was. I felt that it could use more of a defense more than more speed. I feel that if the game goes too fast, it just leads, like, on another topic, to the strafe problem. So it's just,
Yeah, I mean, yeah. Go ahead, Zarya.
I was thinking part of the reason why the game feels so much more fast paced. Obviously, there's the difference of the armor plates that got introduced that don't have a speed penalty. A lot of people over the time have switched to using those because of the fact that they don't have a speed penalty. That makes somewhat of a difference. The other thing that contributes to why it feels faster, why the gameplay feels faster, is I think the average time to kill has gone down. Not talking about just rifle versus rifle, assault versus assault gunfights. I'm talking about the average time to kill. There's so many things that kill you instantly or near instantly. So being able to move is so much more important than buffer in a lot of situations, particularly in the open maps, and we have a lot of open maps.
I agree.
No, I think that's a pretty fair assessment.
It's just not. I understand the concept of having a really fast suit and you're not having the ability to rep versus being a super slow suit and then having the extreme ability to rep. Where the Logi stand right now, except for the Cow Logi, which I feel is completely just still gimped, but where it is now, I understand the concept. Like where you have a Min Logi who you can rep so many people, because that's primarily my suit. I've been running that suit since I started this game. That suit, to me, I understand the concept of it now. It's going to have the extreme versatility more than any other suit in the game, in my personal opinion. You combine that with the fact that it has the stamina to constantly keep up in the fight. It never runs out of energy. Like, you can keep up. Now, you have the Gaulogy where it has that rep ability that Cross was talking about, that it was lacking, making him like still squishy, getting dropped, but he can't really rep himself. I see the rep in that because my Gao logistics can rep enough. It can rep about a bullet back of, if I get covered. So that's about 20, anywhere from 20 to 30 reps a second, depending on how much I want to reduce my armor versus, how much reps do I want to have. So I understand that concept. There's a balance to it. It's just now you're going to make the Logi even faster. And with this update coming in, I feel that you'll bring that back, but it's going to be you're going to strip basically down the Knight and Armor Shield of the old Slayer Logi, but you're going to give it this super fast ability now. And then you're going to give it the added speed that it was lacking, that kind of made it more able to take out, because it's still a logistics. You're supposed to expose yourself. So now it's just dangerous, Like, I already hear Slayers talking about how they're going to switch to Logi fits. Like, it's happening. That talk is already happening amongst the Slayers, the Flavor of the Month players. Those guys that just want to do super, they care about the KD. They want to get a quick smash and get out. So it's like, that's the problem.
Well, there are three things there. One is that currently strafe is directly tied to speed, and so the Flavor of the Month chasers are always going to go for the highest strafe because of how it affects KD. The second is just sort of a point of clarity. While this is definitely going to be something that brings both the Logi and Commando up, and we're focusing on how those implications play out, it's important to not view the EHP to speed ratio as a buff for any given class. That's not what it's there for. That's not why CCP has presented it. And while it will certainly have some of those effects, that isn't its foundation. So discussing it in those terms is going to be a little bit of a distortion, because that is ignoring this sense of normalizing various things across the game. It's not looking at one class or one role and saying, we're going to improve this thing. It's looking at a type of stat relation game-wide and saying, we're going to make this logical amongst all of the things. And then the final element is that I think at this point, there's not a whole lot of reason for many Slayers to stay with the Assault once its best-in-class combination of having curve breaking speed in EHP gets shifted because the class bonuses are kind of weak and there are some other general flaws. But that is something that should be fixed on the assault itself because it's a weakness in the assault, not something that other classes should be gutted or nerfed or maintained at a lower level to avoid, highlighting.
It's like fix this EHP ratio, the speed ratio, and then see where the problems are and then address them. I think is the way to go about it. I mean, and the other thing is, I think that gets missed in a lot of these in a lot of the threads and stuff, is that there's a lot of numbers that can get tweaked in terms of how we feel like the role should play out. I mean, to me, I think it's a combination of your HP, your movement speed, your sprint speed, your stamina regen, and your stamina pool. And I think all of those things can be manipulated in such a way that you end up with suits filling the roles that you feel that we think that they should fill. The question is getting everybody on board with what the heck all those roles are.
That's true. And it's not just the stats on the suits. Those are important and those need to be balanced, but it's not just them. There's also, class bonuses and racial bonuses, which can be balanced, which
that's
can
absolutely
be
huge.
But there's gonna have to be risk taken with that, and I understand that. Like this, I'm just saying that, but this is a definite bold move to start off with. In my opinion, it's going to cause a shift, but I think the next update behind that will fix what this might miss, which goes into an ever evolving sense of. I mean, you're never going to find perfection, but you're trying to figure that balance, and I do feel he's heading in that direction, and that's why he's making these moves.
The one thing I would just offer is that if again it goes back to the discussion about what is the overall design concept. Okay, concept is that the faster you are, the less innate buffer that you will have on your suit, your EHP, and he's trying to establish a logical linear progression for that. So I'm okay with that, Roger. Okay, got it. And he established a very similar curve with DPS versus range. Now, with any of these, you may or may not necessarily agree with them, but it provides a rubric that you can all work around, and a common framework that we can all kind of get our head around, right? Yep. The thing that the only thing I'm offering is that you need to figure out what are the interrelated power linear constructs that you need to have. So with a suit, all I'm proposing is if you want fast and at the top end of the curve, and then the slower it gets, the more buffer it has, awesome. If you don't tie regen to that, you're going to end up in a very weird place. And to me, it's as simple as do the exact same graph that you did with speed and EHP, figure out what those little shotgun dots look like, and then how would you normalize that against that construct. There's a thought, and I think, by the way, Zarya hit this dead on the head. With Logi play in particular, the bonuses which are directly related generally to equipment. That is really the heart of the matter with Logi stuff. Like you could have actually left the slot progression alone and the equipment progression alone, but if the bonuses got reworked based on things like bandwidth, the number of carried objects that you can have, or doing some things to radically adjust how equipment is arrayed versus bonuses, that would have had probably a much deeper impact over time. Now, trust me, I'm all about getting the equipment and the slot progression equalized, which I think broadly is a good idea. And I can see you're absolutely right, Cross, that the speed EHP discussion is a game-wide change that is not targeted to the Logis. It just happens to work out that that's how they're going. So granted, with all of that, but in reference to the Logis, I would offer that if you do not take the opportunity to address racial and role bonuses, you're still going to have some gaping holes in Logi play, just based on how the game is changing the environment of the game.
Yeah, I think that that's spot on, and I don't want to, put words in CCP Rattati's mouth, but just from my conversations with him, I think that the man is very well aware that there are skill reworks that may be needed, or at least polish passes with not just the Logis, but the assaults and, kind of wider. We can really look at it, and honestly, all of the roles game-wide right now, you have front runners within certain races and those that lag behind based largely on what the skill bonuses are. And that's something that has to be looked at. But iterative balance doesn't really let you grab all of that simultaneously and see where the problems are. You have to do step by step, even if it means that for a while there are more obvious holes in the live game.
I agree on that statement. It's there's just got to be a solution to it, but it's not going to be easy in the sense of the Logi is really, really, really complex to really deal with. Like, you have suits geared for certain instances if you really get down to it. So whatever it does, when he does work on that, it'll shift it like entirely for players. If you're a logistics person and you love doing it, like the slightest like respec of points or whatever, I can't really get too deep into that. I don't know that, but I do know once the stats change, that becomes an issue, or it becomes like a benefit to you.
Well,
But
let me just do a quick straw poll of everybody in the room. If you're a logistics suit, player, class, role, whatever, okay, is there a reason that all 4 racial logistics suits should not have some form of a bonus to a rep tool?
I agree, but at the same time, then what would the Mimitar have to offer to the table?
Remotes.
No Logi uses remotes like that.
I
No.
want my demolitions Logi back.
No, but here's the point. Like the rep tool, and this goes back to my comment about like the equipment itself and how we've tied bonuses to it. Does anybody disagree that the rep tool is probably the single most like relatively valued piece of equipment that you're going to be able to carry right
It
now?
is the most valuable.
I
It is the
actually
most valuable.
disagree.
Disagree.
The most
Uplinks.
important,
Go ahead, tell me now,
equipment in
Ohio.
the game is uplinks. There
Yeah.
is
No, it's not.
Yeah.
If you only could have one equipment on your team, it would be uplinks.
No. Here's
No.
the problem. That was true about 6 months ago. It's not true with the number increase in carried now. It's simply not, because everybody can carry plenty of throwdown uplinks and they can keep moving.
Yeah, I think you're taking Jay's comment out of context, because he's not talking about the equipment full stop. He's talking about the equipment as a support specialist.
Yeah, I
Okay,
agree.
that's
I
fair.
still think the rep tool is the most valuable though. Like, through actual experience and stress tests like no other, the rep tool is the most essential tool as a Logi. You keep people alive. Like, that is, you don't even need to spawn back in if you keep that person alive.
I would honestly
One-
say that go ahead, sir.
One thing, yes, you keep armor suits, particularly armor tanked suits that have a lot of buffer, you keep those alive. That's a very specific subset of all the suits. You can rep a min scout all you want. You're probably not going to make a big difference whether, they stay alive or not. So it's a specific subset. In that situation, the rep tool is extremely important, but in overall sense, it's situational.
I think
What is the more valuable tool then?
I'm,
say
I
that
mean-
one thing is that you don't have it. We actually see the problem with not having a shield transporter. Shield rep tool.
Absolutely.
Exactly.
That's true.
exactly.
No,
That's-
and I'm with you. Notice when I say rep tool, I did not specifically. I just mean reps in general. Like anything that reps, whether it's shield or armor, acknowledging that we don't have a shield transporter yet, that is going to be more valuable to a Logi generally throughout the course of a match than any other tool you have.
if you're talking about a Logi that gets like the points, if you're talking about the guy that like constantly feeds that ammo to the group to get that orbital, to get that that ahead of the time kind of reflex, the Logi with the rep tool is going to be situational always, because he's going to be backed by a squad of killers geared towards that. The logistics doesn't just start at the actual suit. It starts with the whole mindset before you get into the game. All those guys are going to gear around that, and Logi's going to fit the needs of everybody in the primary killing squad. So it's literally you have to go in with that mind frame. Now, there's different logistics for everything. I'm not saying that, but I'm talking about in terms of the rep tool. If you want to make sure that you win a match, you roll with a large force of primary killers and you beef them up with reps. Whether we can go in shield reps because that's something I would love to talk about eventually. But the rep tool is essential. The uplink it's more of it's a situational. It makes sure that you're always in the advantage, like a vantage point. You can bounce from here, you can bounce to there, you can bounce from there. I understand the value in that, but the one thing that's won PC battles or just in general pub matches is that rep tool. You can't kill that Slayer because he's got that rep tool locked right behind him.
I would have to say that the uplink is, in terms of actual winning matches, is far more important than the uplink is. Yeah.
Right, but how many people can and or will carry uplinks?
I will say this though. I will say this though. I could see the uplink being it's much more of an assault carry tool.
It's a recon tool.
Or in scouts and stuff like that. But at the same time, if the speed change goes through, I could see the uplink being on the Logi being the more important because they get in, they put those links down where they need to go.
And then they get killed because they have no buffer and no regen.
Kane, first of all, the change to movement speed isn't going to actually make that big of a difference to, the point you're making, because the Logis are still not going to really run in there that much faster or any faster than they do right now. They can't get out of dodge any faster than they do now because they're sprinting at the same speed as they do now.
It depends on which prototype the Rattati goes with, since it's all up
well.
in
I'm
the air.
basing that on his latest the update to his original plan because he posted an update, not like a different version. He said this is an update, so I assumed that's the latest version that he's planning on using. That's all I can base it on. Of course, it could be something entirely different. I can only go on what he gives us.
If you're running logistics, though, you should have a rep tool and a link.
Well, yeah,
sure.
and again, remember we have multiple equipment slots. I mean,
yeah,
but my point generally is, if you're carrying 3 to 4 equipment slots, you can pretty much well bet that one of those slots is definitely going to be eaten up by a rep tool. And then everything else is the situational component about like how do you have your suit primarily set up. But my general point, and it kind of goes back to Zarya's initial thrust on this, was about the bonuses. Like, no shit, if you are a Logi, you're about team support, and the most relatively valuable tool you have over the course of a match is a rep tool. So if you look at the assaults, every assault has some form or fashion of a bonus to a light weapon. Every one of them. Why would you not use that same mindset for a Logi? Because trying to say that the bonus of the Mimitar Logi is equitable to a Cal Logi with the Hive, particularly with the fact that everybody can carry a fucking ass load of hives right now, it's insane. Like if you drop compact nano hives at your feet, why do I need reps from anybody? If I'm an assault player.
The only way I see the problem with that statement is just, well, not the problem with your statement, but the reason why I feel it wouldn't be transferred to all logistics is because you're talking about a racially specific tool.
No,
versus an actual class.
But why is it a racially specific tool?
Well,
when you look at the description, it uses characteristics of all 4 races to build it.
Well, primarily.
Go ahead, Zarya.
Well, primarily, first of all, the original the 4 different equipment that were assigned to the Logis. It was a completely arbitrary. The racial identification of those equipment was completely arbitrary. If you look at the actual logistic suits and what they're suited for, the specific equipment doesn't actually make sense in all circumstances. But that's beside the point. What you were saying about the light weapons, the assault class having their bonus to weapons, they still do have a bonus to their specific racial weapon. And then there's the class bonus to fitting weapons, the same way as Logis have a class bonus to fitting equipment, and then a bonus to racial equipment. Whether that racial equipment, like the actual assignment of the race, makes sense or not, it follows the same formula as the as the assault bonus. Now, logistics have a more limited pool of equipment, so it's only one specific equipment. But that leads to my other point, which is the point I made basically immediately after the original, like when 1.8 was coming up and we were told what the bonuses would be. This is the point I made. In some ways, yes, the rep tool is important, and the bonus to it is massive, and it is absolutely, in specific situations, it is really powerful. I'm not, denying that. However, the Galente Logi gets a bonus to scanners. You can fit 4 scanners on your suit, and every single slot that you're using utilizes that bonus because the scanners have a cooldown. If you fit 4 scanners, you just switch from one scanner to another, scan a different area, you're utilizing your bonus. If you're as a Caldari Logi, you carry different nano hives, you're utilizing your bonus for all those different nano hives. Same for the Amar Logi with the uplinks. If you're a Minmatar Logi, there's absolutely no reason to carry more than one rep tool. Maybe you can get away with saying you're carrying a core focused for a specific situation when you're repping one heavy in a really intense gunfight and they need that extra rep amount, and then you have another longer range with 2 targets. But even that is a complete waste of an equipment slot to carry two rep tools at the same
I wouldn't
time.
say it's a waste, but I've used it before. If I'm running with 2 heavies and one gets dropped, I just hijack the next one with a core focus, and literally he gets wired into a situation.
Sure. I mean, like I said, you could argue that makes sense. I don't really agree that it's the best use of that equipment slot, but you could do that. But you still can only use one. You can only use one of them at a time, and only one of them can be effective at a time, and that is not true for any of the other equipments, any of the other racial equipments.
I think you're also making an argument that there is an equitable nature to the value. I would disagree. I mean, my perspective is I would disagree with you. Like if you look at like the Cal Logi bonus, I can carry a different suite of hives, absolutely. But on a Cal Logi with 3 equipment slots currently, how many of those do you think I'm going to carry hives on?
Well, no, I don't know. That depends on your personal choice. Like, for instance, I would never carry 2 rep tools, whereas some other Minmatologies would. But no, Jason, actually, I wasn't making a point about them being equitable. I was making a point about them being unbalanced. They're unbalanced in different ways, yes. The Caldari Logi definitely has issues. It definitely needs something, and just having a bonus to hives isn't going to do that. The point I'm actually making is that you can look at it from different directions, and the Logi bonuses just are not balanced. They need to be fixed. I don't personally
agree with that.
I don't personally think that the way to fix it would be to give everyone, just give all the races a bonus to rep tools, and then give them their, racial equipment bonus, because that would leave Minmatar with explosives, which I personally find extremely entertaining as a thought. And a demolitions player can still be a support player, absolutely. But I really don't think the game balance needs a Logi to be bonused into something that's...
Here's the thing. There are different things that you could give them bonuses to, like by and large. But as to your point about having, saying the equipment bonuses follow the assault tree, I have a parallel but different perspective on that. The concept is for the assaults is that their primary function. It depends on how you look at the Logis to a degree. The assaults, their primary function is to deal damage generally. So most of their bonuses are functionally specific to a racial weapon which deals damage. For the Logis, it is equipment specific racially. I'm totally with you on that. I think it's how we see. It's just a difference of perspective. So what would be the opposite of dealing damage? To me, it would be preventing or healing damage. The one thing that ultimately really does that is the opposite of a light weapon would be a rep tool. So that's kind of where my mindset was. I don't disagree factually with anything you said earlier about that. I think it's literally just a matter of perspective. That's all, in terms of how the different bonuses should flow. But again, I might be a victim of being a longtime Eve player as well. To me, if you're a Logi, one of your role bonuses should be the ability to rep. And that could be either distance, it could be efficacy, and then if they eventually did add in shield reps, that gives you a whole other dimensions that they can mess with. There's all kind of things that you could do there in addition to something else. And it doesn't, for the Minmatar Logi, it doesn't necessarily have to be, remotes. That was just something I threw out because it is something that falls in an equipment slot. There are other things. I mean, the reality is that the Minmatar, at least in Eve, when you look at their ship bonuses, they often run dual bonuses that gives you increased flexibility, which is generally the hallmark of those suits, even in Dust. So there are things that you could do to even that out. My point is very much in line with yours, though. If you actually want to address Logis, anything you do with the base suit stats, I got it. I mean, I could work with what we have now, in all honesty, because I've been working with it for a long time. But the reality is that the bonuses of the suits need to be adjusted based on how we've introduced bandwidth, how the max carried capacity has changed dramatically for everybody, which has clearly devalued nano hives and uplinks.
It really has.
So we need to think through that component as a whole. So writ large, I think you and I see the problem in a parallel fashion, not necessarily in sync, but we're driving at the same thing. And I think that really goes down to role and racial bonuses for the Logis.
And there's an additional piece in here, which isn't the bonuses themselves, but when you talk about the method between the Assault and the Logi being similar, the method is very, very parallel, but the things that the method can be applied to as far as stuff to equip is vastly disparate. You don't have 4 racial versions of uplinks as you do with rifles. You don't have 4 racial versions of repair tools as you do with rifles, and that goes across the boards. While there are different other weapon types, like you don't have 4 racial shotguns, for example, the rifle, which is the central element of the way that those bonuses tend to be used, there is a version in every race. Equipment doesn't have that, and it really makes the current equipment bonuses a lot more pigeonholing as far as what they are and what you can do with them.
I mean,
Absolutely.
that's why I kind of look at it in that light of, the whole rep tool. I mean, as great as it would be to be a Logi and have that on all of my different suits, I just see, in my personal opinion, it's like, okay, it's really specific. If there isn't, like you said, there isn't 4 different racial classes of rep tools. Like, I mean, I don't see it, being pulled outside of that realm. It could be just off of if we all pull together and do it, but would I be upset if it wasn't on every suit? I wouldn't really feel, different about it if it was just still locked to the Minmatar Logi just because of the other, equipment out there.
Well, what would be nice, I guess, because I do agree with the fact that, first of all, Logis should have a wider spectrum of equipment that they're bonus to. I think it's silly that it's just one, equipment that they have a bonus to, because they have 4 equipment slots. So, it would be nice to actually utilize a bonus in a way that, made use of all those equipment slots, at least most of them.
In the past. It used to be like that. It felt like it at least.
Well,
in terms of the access to it, it wasn't gimped at any level. It was like you had access to every equipment. It wasn't, like, oh, well, this gives you a super bonus to this. It was just even around, all around.
Because it's like the fact that, you have a Galente Logi, particularly in PC context, which is not the entire game, but particularly in PC context. If you have a Galente Logi and you're not running at least 3 scanners, you're basically just
not using the suit right.
Yeah, exactly. And it feels really gimped in some ways. I mean, it's specialization, I guess, so it has its ups and downs, but it feels gimped in some ways.
I mean, at the same time, though, that Gal Logi is so important. But I guess yours, I see it cutting both ways. I see what you're saying on it being like, it's kind of weird that, that's what, in order to fully utilize the Gal Logi, you have to use like all your equipment slots for scanners.
It's kind of, it should be a valid choice, but it shouldn't be the, only viable choice. Like it, you shouldn't feel like you're, screwing your entire team over by doing something else with it.
Well, yeah. And I think the other point is PC is also very, one of the hallmarks of PC is hyper specialization. The ultimate min max. So I think it's to be expected. In all honesty, I'm not saying it's good, bad, or evil, but I don't know that it's necessarily something you're ever going to get away from. Which is also one of the reasons why I'm always very leery of quote unquote balancing based on PC.
And like I said, it's just an example from PC, and that's not the whole game at all. And
I'm
very
there's
aware of
different
that.
elements. Yeah, there's different elements to it.
Yeah, it does make a good sort of canary in the coal mine, though, as far as possible edge cases or even more specifically trends that one should keep an eye on.
So the trick is to, I guess, make it enjoyable for the people who really want to dive into the suit, and also at the same time make it just wider range for someone who just dabs into the Logi. I feel that's where he's trying to go with it, but I mean, it's all about your brain. Me, I'm just really into logistics. So, like, for me, it's like, how much can I get out of this suit?
I think what worried me was some of the initial comments, including some by Rattati, that seemed quite struck with the idea of, like, here's your scrambler pistol, and go forth and do some Logi stuff.
Yeah.
That worried me greatly when I saw that.
Yeah.
You have to be. At the end of the day, it's a first-person shooter. Like.
But it's different. This is the first game where the aspect goes into it's not about the KD. I come from FPS, and it's all about the assault class. It's so easy to just gear an assault class to assault, to kill in KD, in this kind of FPS game. But for this, you actually get to save a life. You get to work behind the scenes and actually, keep the game going in your own special way. Instead of just killing people, you make the map situational for everybody's benefit on your team. Like that, it can get you can cross the line really quick, dabbing into that with just a general view of everything. So it's like, like I said, it gets really defensive for someone who's really into logistics. It's kind of like, yo, be careful what you touch.
Yeah, there's an important balance there, and I think that the sidearm only oft recurrent idea is a highlight of the worst way to go about it.
No.
Because you either need to have, essentially what any role needs, Logi or otherwise, is to provide pound for pound as much worth as any other role on the field so that you're not hindering your team by choosing a play style you enjoy.
Dude, we're targets.
Yeah, I mean, like, ideal balance, you want everyone to have equal value, not in the same ways, of course, but roughly equal weight as far as what they can bring to the table. Yeah. Now, you can go two ways with Logi. You can either make them non-combat and give them other bonuses that are profound enough as a force multiplier to where they can still contribute equally, or you can make them sort of a combat medic where, yes, you don't have the DPS output of an assault, a commando, you don't have the stand and fire and hold a point ability of a sentinel, but you still do have the ability to exist in a combat zone and have more moderate equipment bonuses. The problem becomes when you try to do the sidearm only type of thing, is essentially making them mediocre at lots of stuff, makes them a bad bet as far as comparable value to the team. And that's really where the issue lies.
Exactly.
Yeah, the sidearm just is in no way, shape, or form able to compete with a light weapon in this game. It just doesn't.
The interesting thing that ended up being posted by Rattati was some spitballing idea. He was pining for a support weapon class in one post.
Oh god,
I would love to see a grenadier class.
Bad idea.
Yeah, I mean, I understand where he's coming from, but I don't know.
Here's the thing, is that the whole sidearm Logi thing does not come from the fact that they go, oh, we want the Logis to be weak combat. It really comes from, we want to make sure that the assaults are better at killing people than the Logis are, so let's gimp the Logis weapon to make the assaults better, rather than just, making the assaults better through bonuses or whatnot. And that's what really irks me with that argument, is that they aren't even giving the real reason for why they're saying it. Maybe they don't understand it, but the fact of the matter is that if you're concerned about the Slayer Logi being better than the assault at killing people, then simply make the assault better at killing people. And the way to go about that is not by giving them a sidearm, is by giving the assault better bonuses.
Assault supremacy, basically.
Well, bonuses should define the role, and if assaults are meant to kill people, then have their damn role bonuses help them kill people better, and the current ones aren't strong enough.
I mean, we already had a similar issue again when the new scout suits came out, and the Galente scout particularly, that already existed, but it got buffed. Same with the Minmatar scout, but the scout suits were suddenly quite good and quite appealing to the KDR chasers, and yeah, you saw a lot more scouts and barely any assaults because the scouts did the assault job better than the assault suit did.
Yep.
There's a
And
complete
that was
shift.
balanced out by buffing the assault suit, not just by gimping the scout suit.
Yes.
So I mean,
Well, I said this in the thread as well, that you can make the argument that, oh, well, scouts are E-War, so they should only have a sidearm too, which would immediately result in the barbershop coming in and murdering everyone in the thread. So that line of logic is just bad. If you want to make a suit better at killing, you need to give it the tools to do so, not by making every other suit bad at killing.
Now, to your point, Pokey, one of the things that I've always kind of said when this has occasionally raised its head is, if you look at like across all the suits, now some of this also means that like again, my standpoint is I take the tack that everybody that hits the field, because there's a reason you have to equip a weapon, right? In fact, like you can't deploy unless you equip a weapon. So that means that you're intended to shoot things. That's like job one in the game, as Kane said, and it is a first-person shooter game. So if they want to go with a sidearm piece, what I would recommend is they generally don't limit you, but what you do is you incentivize people. So you get some mild bonus to sidearms if you're a scout or a Logi player. Okay, you don't get anything to light weapons, which they don't anyway. And then the assault class and higher get bonuses or incentives to run light weapons, or whatever. To me, it's more about how do you incentivize something? How can I add a dimension without taking away? And perhaps if by the way, if they also did like a legit pass on the sidearms to make them a little bit more viable, that might also be not a bad thing either. That might actually encourage me to run an SMG or a MagSec or whatever, if I was going to get some level of buff for it. Because for me, the majority of what I do, when I'm playing Logi, is usually something involving equipment. But the reality is, often in a game like this, the best support that you can give is with a weapon, not a rep tool, certainly not a needle, and not with a hive, and not with an uplink. So there may be something to that. That we might want to look at as another option, but I'm certainly against. And also, like the discussion about taking grenades away, absolutely ridiculous.
No. Just no.
I think everybody was beefing about Cal Logis with core locust grenades. You know what? I don't care. Boo hoo.
It's a grenade.
Well,
it's supposed to kill you. It's a grenade.
Well, and with the current hives the way they are, it's anyone with a single equipment slot and grenades. Saying the Cal Logi either means you don't grasp the game mechanics very well, you don't pay attention, or you're being disingenuous. I mean, let's really be honest.
I mean, there's exploitation on all grounds. I mean, the same with the Cal Logi and the Locust grenades is similar to the Assault Amara with the Scrambler rifle right now because it's OP. I mean, there's always going to be something that's going to be teetered towards what we call the flavor of the month. But the actuality of it, it's a grenade. It hasn't changed at all since its inception into this game, and we've been using it forever. It's just I feel more people have been complaining about this grenade because the warfare of the combat in the game has shifted to speed. So less armor, less shield, more squishy people, and now they're getting connected by a grenade that's never changed its damage output. We used to have really tanked out fits in the past. Like we used to have like a lot of tanked out fits, and it shifted to a quick modernized style of warfare. Now it's faster, it's way faster, and it's just squishy people, and they don't want to get hit by a grenade that goes boom. That's basically what it is.
Well, yeah, with the hit detection being what it is, combined with the bottom falling out of the TTK a while back, you really have a lot more use of AoE weapons, which is primarily explosives.
Mass driver.
Yep, because you can't hit things very effectively in other contexts, and engagements are so short, tactics are barely relevant in most of them, aside from the initial flanking or getting the drop on someone.
And E-War too. E-War has changed that a lot. Like you cannot detect a scout that's got below the most a proto suit will pick up from a Logi is somewhere between 21 to like 27 dBs, and the scout can go like way low below that. Next thing you know, they're behind you. You can't read anything. You can't pick it up unless you have scanners on your Logi, but those have cooldowns. So eventually that scout's going to get close enough to you, and you're going to get a knife in your back or a shotgun in your face. So area denial just allows you to just turn around and spread. Like, it's just a shot of just a wide fire spread. And it just, these guys are mad right now. The fast, squishy people are mad from large, just mass drivers. Any explosive, they're just mad at it right now.
And well, one thing I have to say about this, people being so scared of the Logi with the core locus nade spam. Like I pointed out earlier in that thread in response to that is maybe, just maybe, it's the core locus nade that's the problem, not the Logi. And maybe, just maybe, we should take a look at the core locus nade and the way it interacts with hives, whether they be bonused by the Logi bonus or not. But just,
the grenade hasn't changed at all.
No, it hasn't, exactly.
But
it
the
hasn't
people
changed.
have changed. The people have shifted to the game.
Yeah, exactly. I'm not saying that the nade has changed, but I'm saying the gameplay has changed, and maybe something needs to be adapted. But I don't think gimping the Logi is the way to deal with the core locus nade, because it's not the Logi that's the problem.
The thing is, there's ways around it now. Like, you can easily, there's ways around it. I just feel like people just want it to happen, and then they're just, I'm mad at it, so I want this to change, instead of just saying, well, what can I build on my suit with the mass customization that this game offers to counter? It hasn't changed. It's just, I just feel like these people are mad.
Here's the thing. Like, me personally, I'm not a proponent of changing the core locus grenade, and I'm also not a huge proponent of changing how it interacts with hives. And the only reason why is because every time I hear somebody whinging about it, the reality is, it's just a tool in the game that's no different. A lot of people are like, it's a no skill weapon, it's this, that, and the other. Okay, fine, sure, I got it. You don't like it because you feel that it one hits your speed tank, scout / assault suit. That's not really my problem, Mister. I just went 23-5, and I'm beefing because somebody got lucky with a core locus grenade when they were trying to clear a hallway. Like, I don't really care about that. It doesn't affect me. And you know what? If somebody is so busy trying to spam core locus grenades from a high point, I'm pretty sure that I can figure out a way to get up there and kill that guy, or I can shoot at him at a longer range than he can actually throw his grenade at me. So I'm not that concerned about it, because it's just one of those you have to really take it a bit with a grain of salt, I think.
Yeah, well, there's also two parts to it. I mean, there's the question of the core nade itself, or the gameplay, the meta that's kind of been touched on by everyone right now. But then there's also the question of, is it limited to the context that's being brought up? Because it is nowhere near the case that core locus grenades can only be spammed from a Logi. Like, that's not even remotely the actuality of gameplay. If you stack 3 assaults of any race who are carrying hives as their equipment in one area, one or more of them can happily spam grenades. Same is true of scouts. Same is true of, well, everything but the Sentinel, to be blunt. So saying this is a risk for the Logi is at best a lack of grasp of game mechanics, and at worst is an obfuscation and an attempt to keep a hold of a method or denigrate a role for reasons that are not actually pertinent to what you're talking about.
Not a lot of people weigh in the factor of human ingenuity on top of that. Someone's desire to win that bad that they're going to do whatever they got to do to get the win. That's just, you like, just building off of what you said, like, if there's a team of people, gearing to do something, they're going to shift it to their advantage. That just comes with the territory of this game, which I like a lot. It's just, there's a counter to everything. Like, it just depends on how deep you want to go, and, do you want to, cross that line, or do you want to, deal with it,
Yeah, no, I think that's a pretty fair way of looking at it. I'm trying to cycle through if we have any other critical pieces. I'm sure that, like, with given the group of people we have in the room, that we could go on and on about this. I do want to give a quick jab over to Bam Havoc, who is a professional heavy. I think he's pretty much run heavy his whole career. So he comes at it from a very different perspective than most of us do in the room. And I'd like to tee Bam up for a little bit of a bit of an outsider's perspective on what we've been talking about, which is very internal to kind of our play style and how he thinks it kind of interacts or what his general thoughts are.
Well, with regards to Logis, I love them. I love my Gimps on leashes. I've run with Zara quite a few times, and she's always repped me whenever I needed them. What I'll do is I'll tell you a story, and it'll be a BAM story. I hope this will relate to you guys in some sort of sense. Many years ago, way back when the Forge gun was supposedly overpowered with regards to its range and DPS, quite a few people petitioned to have it nerfed, and nerfed into the ground, limited by DPS, splash, and range. Now, the problem with nerfing it like that, it then couldn't engage the red line rail tanks out in the distance, and then the red line rail tanks became a problem, and are still somewhat of a problem today. Tanks, I mean, with that, dropships could then also get away from the massive onslaught of forge guns. My point is that whatever you touch, regardless to it being a reptile, a grenade, bonuses, whatever, it's going to have a cascading effect on everything else in the game. Everything in the game is interlinked with everything else. So the forge guns' range and DPS initially was there to combat any vehicle on the field. Now, the forge gun, I've got to wear my Warakomi and Ishikone forge guns just to stand toe-to-toe with any dropship, regardless of it being a fully tanked, fully shielded one. They're double-armored tanks out there that I can barely scratch. You know, this is coming from a forge gunner's perspective. And yes, I am one of the ones that sits on a roof like a coward with a camp source and a fire and a tent, firing rounds down. So yeah, just be careful what you guys touch, because the second you do, even if it's one small change, it will have a cascading effect on everything else in the game. So instead of doing double digits or single digits tweaks, perhaps maybe a point of a percentage. I'm just voicing concern and caution, really. And that's my backstory.
I think that's actually a fair point, and that's one of the things that I think a lot of us touched on, is that if you do A, then you must touch B, because if you do A in isolation, then there's likely to be a problem, or there's going to be you're going to have less than the intended effect that you want. So I think that's a pretty fair statement.
Oh, totally. I mean, I know quite a few people called for the forge gun to be tweaked, and yes, it did. It needed to. Something had to happen to it, but now it's got to a place where it can't really do anything it's meant to. You know, you need to have a double stack of forges just to sort of chase away a dropship or keep a tank at bay. But, you know, such is the game, get on with it and do it. You know, you don't sit there bitching and moaning about it on the forums. That doesn't solve anything immediately. Get your buddies, get help, and do it, you know? So, yeah, I'm definitely up for the be proactive and game and do it yourself sort of thing. But just be careful what you guys wish for, because you'll get it, and then it'll break the game further.
Well, that's a fair warning. So, what I would like to do, guys, since we've covered a ton of ground tonight, as we kind of wrap up real quick, we'll kind of go through the list of everybody in relation to, you know, kind of your if you were king for a day, Logi changes, you know, 30 seconds or less. Like, what do you think you would change, update? You know, whatever, you know, no matter how big, how small, what are the things you want to do? Just a quick jab for the record. Again, king for the day, or queen for the day, rather, for Zarya and Zell. If you could just let us know what you think that would be. So we'll start off with Silly, and we'll kind of skip around here. So Silly, if you were king for a day and you could do anything with the Logis, what do you think you'd change or update?
I would just update the overall defense of the Logi, and I would go back and give it. I would give it reps. I would just, you know, just favoritism. It wouldn't hurt to have self reps. I would love to be a Logi repping like 20 plus, like on every single suit.
Okay, all right, fair point. Zarya.
Oh god, I was hoping you wouldn't get to me next. increase survivability, whatever the way it is, however we accomplish that. Introduce more equipment to make it more interesting, including the shield transporters / shield rep tools that I proposed to Cross earlier. And 3, buff assaults. Woohoo!
Totally legit. Zell.
I would remove Logis just to make all the Logi players in here cry.
Bro.
Okay. All right. Cool. Useful as always. Let's see. Cross.
I would look at the skills. Mumble is being weird. Am I back?
Yep. Go ahead.
Okay, good. I'd do something about the racial skills so that you weren't pigeonholed to a type of lodging based on which race you wanted to skill into, and improve survivability, because obviously that's something that any role needs or it can't function. And then, as has been stated prior, I would add a shield rep, because right now, part of the imbalance that we get, not just with Logis, but game-wide with tank, is a lack of that ability to have support.
Okay. Good one. Pokey.
I would give all Logis a bonus for repair tool / shield transporters, so they'd have more options rather than their single pigeonholed racial bonuses. I would match their slot progression to the assault, may that be with slot aside or not, and I would probably give them more regen if they are indeed having the faster, lower buffer model.
Okay. Kane.
I would take a look at equipment overall, especially in terms of pricing and performance, with advanced and basic equipment often being utterly useless and being forced to run proto equipment to actually be effective.
Well said. Bam.
And the proto compact hive.
What? No.
Bam. What do you got, man?
Well, I've got 3 things really. Firstly, people who keep talking about weapon balances and stuff haven't actually fired a bloody weapon. So the people doing the balances, I'd get them to go to a shooting range somewhere and squeeze up a few different rounds of different weapons, so maybe they can grasp the concept of what an actual weapon is to fire. Secondly, I'd like to see more armor and heavies, personally, with regards to a little bit more rep. And thirdly would be a UI change to the interface. We're meant to be flying around little 2D spaceships, yeah? But every time I log on to Dust 514 and I'm in my station, and it actually says I'm in my station because in the top left-hand corner it says I'm in an assembly plant in Galente space. I'm not in Galente space. I'm flying around New Eden in my little spaceship. Please change that, please.
Fair point.
It breaks all sorts of law. I'm a law guy. It breaks it all. Why? Why?
Okay. So I guess what I would generally say about Logis, if I were going to address them, I do like the idea of the slot and equipment equalization numbers that Rattati's laid out. So that's all good. If they go in as described by him, I would add some regen to the faster suits. I would give the Logis somewhere near just shy of the scout suits in terms of regen, which is where they would fall in the speed chart, by the way. 2, I would give all Logis some form of rep tool bonus as part of their roll bonus. And clearly I like the idea of adding a shield transporter, which would increase the viability of any number of different shield tank suits dramatically. 3, I would expand the amount of bonuses per equipment, either a primary and an alternate or something, but I would give them more than what they're rolling around with in terms of their current equipment bonuses. It's just the equipment itself is it's too disparate in terms of its value to anybody. The last thing I would look at is instead of having buffer HP, I would really look at having damage resist profiles. We have damage profiles in the game, and we have the Sentinels, which do have resists. But I would recommend certain suits having resistance profiles, which, while it does give you another layer of complexity, it also gives you some more tweaks that you can mess around with other than raw buffer. And the last thing, and this is my final pitch, I think I came to the conclusion that if I were king for a day, I would also swap the bonuses for the Gal and the Cal Logi. The Galente Logi, because they racially have a much higher rate of fire. Probably hives work better for them, and also the repping and the dual use hives would work pretty solid for them in close quarters as drop and go. Whereas the Caldari generally are the quote unquote standoff race, having the ability to shoot at range and the ability to detect targets at range, I think is probably pretty useful. So anyway, I will strip all of that away, and we can go ahead and jump into shout outs here in a second. Barring anybody else that wants to jump in there with any saved rounds.
Are we going in order?
Yep. We'll go from bottom to top. So Zarya, any shout outs?
How would you have to start with me? Well,
Because you're at the bottom of the list.
Fine. We'll have to reorganize the alphabet next.
Well, you'll notice what Zell does. He just writes middle of the list. Zell.
All right, that's good. I'll have to think of that in the future. Okay. Well, I guess I'll have to give a shout out to well, first of all, to our beloved Viking, Ratati, for finally getting on with the program. I know he's been doing good work, and particularly recently, I actually feel like he's really been listening to the community more than I thought was possible. So kudos to him for that, and also a shout out to my boys in Outer Heaven for giving me gray hairs too early.
Fair point. All right, Silly.
Once again, shout out to all my Logis. Shout out to Negative Feedback, and I would love to see some type of officer equipment challenge in the future. That's what I'm hoping. I would love to get my name on a rep tool.
Oh, that's pretty legit. Pokey.
Shout out to everyone on the show, to Silly Rabbit for coming on for the second time, and to Zarya for making it, even though Cross screwed up the time and told her to come an hour later. So thanks, guys, for showing up. We're glad to have new voices and opinions on these topics.
All right. Okay. Zell.
Yeah, I'm gonna give my shout to Zarya and the Silly Rabbit for being, new blood to show up on the podcast and mix things up a bit.
Good deal.
And, and also
go ahead.
to Kane for actually making it on the show this week.
Hey, twice in a row.
Alrighty. Okay, Kane.
Shout out to all the people who are crazy enough to continue playing this game. As always, a shout out to the crazy people in the Negative Feedback Alliance. Put up with me every day.
Alrighty. Let's see, Cross.
Shout out to Zarya for putting up with me despite the many things I do to harass her on a daily or weekly basis. Shout out to CCP's Ratati and Frame for not banning me or sending sharp Viking warriors to my house for how often I harass them about a port. Shout out to the community at large for putting up with me demanding specific details every time they have even the slightest opinion on everything. And shout out to the Logis in general. Thanks all for keeping it real and actually sticking with the game despite all of the craziness over the past, well, let's be honest, since closed beta.
Okay, sounds good. Bam, shoutouts?
Well, I don't really do shoutouts. I just thank you guys really for allowing me and my craziness to come onto the show, and I'll be seeing you guys in a few. Yeah, cheers, thanks.
All right, and I'm Jason Larison, and shout-outs obviously go to our guests for showing up. Great discussion. This is probably one of the, for me anyway, is like one of the more fun discussions, unless we're having a pick on Zell night, which is most nights. But it was a really good crew tonight, so I really appreciate everybody for coming on. Bam, thanks. Cross, as always. Kate Sparrow, always great to have the bad guy here. Then we have the infamous Silly Rabbit. Great seeing you again, brother. And Zarya, who is one of my favorite Logi broettes, I guess, in the game, and an absolutely top-notch player that you can always learn from. So, again, really appreciate everybody coming together for that one. And my last shout-out, believe it or not, is to my buddy Pokey Draven, who did me a solid because he knows I'm a big Deadpool fan. And he created the Dead Sin drop suit skin. And it was a high HD image. It was really, really awesome looking, and he shot it over to Ratati. It was a Caldari medium frame. Really, really smoking looking image. He's throwing it around on Twitter. It's really, really slick. And I do want to give him
jump in here real quick.
Go ahead.
I don't really care for the look of the Caldari suit in general, and I'm not big into cosmetics, and I would buy this skin.
I want to see it.
It's totally legit. Poke, you're going to link it to
Yeah,
everybody.
I'll send you a link, and I probably am going to do more if people have requests for anything specific. I can only do so much because I don't have the base images for all the suits, but if you guys have any requests, hit me up on Twitter or email me or just post in the forums.
Yeah,
Save
absolutely.
your money for beer. Don't spend it on suits. Beer.
Oh my God. All right. So with that, guys, we're going to go ahead and land the plane. So we appreciate everybody for showing up for episode 56 of Biomassed, aka the Logi Pain Train. So again, everybody's got an open invite to come back. We really appreciate all of it. And Zarya, seriously, anytime you want to come back, or if there's a topic you want to bring up, we'd love to have you back on. Same for you, Silly. Great voices on the show.